Okay, everybody, how's it going? I hope it's going well. My name is David Parsons. This is the Nostalgia Trap. If you've been keeping up with our quarantine conversations, both on the main feed and on our Patreon page, you know that we've been talking with Justin Rogers Cooper and others about what this moment really means, what the pandemic is going to do to us, and none of us really has any answers or particular predictions for the future. But I think our main hope and one of our main lines here on the Nostalgia Trap is like, how can we view this as an opportunity to overturn a lot of the rotten shit that brought us to this place? And a lot of that rotten shit is embedded in class, capitalism, and the institutions that kind of express that for us. For many of us, and I think a lot of people who listen to the Nostalgia Trap, the primary institution through which we've experienced that is academia and the university system. So, as I sit here, an adjunct that's now teaching my classes on Zoom has had some of my summer classes canceled, and I have no idea what the fall will be like. Part of me thinks like, well, I'm used to this. This is like an uncertainty about the future that I've grown to be accustomed to over the 15 years I've been teaching college. And part of that is because of, my own kind of class position. I'm someone who is, doesn't come from a lot of wealth and had moved through the system, I think with as a first generation Ph.D., someone who was kind of behind a lot of other people in figuring out what it all means. And so all those kind of institutional issues with academia are something that, the pandemic might give us a pause and a moment to think about what really matters. I mean, if I'm looking for any signs of hope, I'm seeing things like the UC system is already kind of reducing, getting rid of the SAT requirements and reducing their grade requirements. Things like that. I know they're like emergency measures to try to keep their enrollment up. But things like that kind of give me hope that we can look through the catastrophe of the pandemic and begin to see what really matters about these institutions. Because I mean, like you, I'm someone who has definitely gotten so pessimistic and cynical and demoralized about academia over the years that I've wanted to totally give up and go somewhere else. I just don't know where else I would go. And the other part of it is that I don't want to give up on academia. I dedicated a lot of my life to this because I really believe in the idea of learning and of teaching and of all those kinds of ideals, those human ideals that are invested in it. I know that we can easily romanticize that stuff, but I still believe in it, and I think that this might be an opportunity to kind of shift things and shift our priorities, and that's what I hope. So my guest today is someone who has an experience in academia that I think a lot of people who listen to this show will recognize, even if you don't recognize the actual kind of details of it. Her name is Mistress Snow, Ph.D. You might recognize her as a figure on Twitter at Mistress Snow, Ph.D. That is a pseudonym, of course, but she wrote an article in the Chronicle of Higher Education that came out a couple months ago that really blew a lot of people's minds because it's about sex work. It's about sex work and class and the way class functions in academia. The piece is called "I Told My Mentor I Was a Dominatrix. She Rescinded Her Letters of Recommendation." And that tells kind of the basic outline of the story, which is that, she was more or less rejected by her academic mentor because her academic mentor found out through her that she was doing sex work to pay the bills. And I think that kind of like, I don't know, beyond the kind of ridiculous Victorian reaction, there's also some kind of, I think the shock there is that there are so many people in academia, entrenched academics, professors, etc., that don't understand the life of contingent academics, graduate students, recent PhDs who are in a market that has just basically collapsed even before the pandemic came. This is a job market that is nearly impossible, especially for people in the humanities to navigate. And especially for people that are first generation and come from a class situation where they're not really tapped into those social connections that get you jobs. So there are so many elements to this, and Mistress Snow, PhD, is a really great voice on all these issues, and her story of kind of trying to make it by doing sex work and getting backlash from that in the halls of academia is something that, again, I think connects to a lot of our stories, whether you do sex work or not. So this is a really fun conversation, and I hope you enjoy it. We're talking about all sorts of pandemic-related politics and things like that on our Patreon page. We have all sorts of new episodes with Justin Rogers Cooper, which I know people are enjoying, and I'm really enjoying the feedback and replies and comments and community we have on Patreon. So if you want to join that and get in on that conversation, it would really help me out. And that's at patreon.com/nostalgiatrap. Thank you to all the people who are joining up recently. I'm really having a fun time. I think the pandemic has given us quite the nostalgia trap moment to chew on a lot of these ideas and really kind of accelerate our thinking there. And I include all the people who listen to this show as part of that community. So thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Here is me speaking with Mistress Snow, Ph.D. Okay, so we will call you Mistress Snow, Ph.D. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me on.
You had a wonderful piece in the Chronicle a few months ago called "I Told My Mentor I Was a Dominatrix," and she rescinded her letters of recommendation. That's the little subtitle. Which is something that, I think everyone who listens to the Nostalgia Trap should go check out, because I'm not someone who's had any experience with sex work, and yet I identified with the whole thing because a lot of it is about the hustle and the kind of hustle of being an adjunct and the hustle of being an academic, particularly one who doesn't have a full-time tenure-track job and one that's kind of outside of that. But I'm wondering, just to start us off, I mean, it's hard to ignore the times we're living in right now. How has the virus, I think we're just calling it the virus, TM.
The virus.
Yeah. How is that? How is that affecting your hustle? Because when I think about, like, I'm an adjunct, and I lost a couple of jobs, and I don't know, I was barely kind of cobbling together an existence, and now I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. Like, I want to think about the academic job market and everything else. How about you?
Well, God, I haven't lost any of my academic jobs. Conveniently, we've all just moved online. Excuse me. But I haven't been able to do any sex work at all since the end of February. I got fired from the last dungeon where I was working because I left early one day because I was so sick. And I remember emailing my boss being like, yo, there's like coronavirus and shit. Like, let me go home. Clients don't want to see me like sneezing. And he was like, no, fuck you.
Wow.
And I was like, well, fuck you. And I left and he fired me. And I got rehired at another dungeon. But the day I was going to start there, they shut down indefinitely. So
this is a part of your income that you're wondering, like, what do I do now?
Pretty much. Yeah, it's weird. And I mean, I've considered doing online sessions, but they're just like, I don't know, not my thing. But yeah, no, I haven't been able to make any money from sex work in 3-4 weeks.
So no transition to Zoom Dom work. I mean, I'm sure people are doing it, right? Like,
oh, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like webcam sessions have always kind of been a thing.
Right.
But yeah, I don't really have, like, I live with a bunch of roommates. Like, I can't imagine, like, being like, hey, can I use the living room for the next hour? Like, I don't know. I'm going to be, like, just pointing my feet for an hour. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Just want to come in? Like,
that reminds me. I mean, years ago when I was living in the Valley, I had a roommate that did like phone sex work in her room, and we would hear her in there sometimes, like performing a little bit. But it seemed we were all so jealous. We were like, because she had a very like sultry voice, and so she was like kind of lucrative in this market. And I was like, what a great hustle. Jeez.
Well, I do have like a night flirt account, which is like the internet equivalent of phone sex, but I stopped using it after I was teaching last semester in one of my classes, and my phone rang, and I think I was expecting a call about like a job, and I picked it up, and it was like, you have a call from Night Flirt. Like, that is it, we're done.
Good Lord.
But yeah.
So in terms of the academic job market, were you actively applying for jobs at this point, or what were you thinking? I mean, it's the academic job market is like, I don't know, for those that don't know, it's, there are a lot of people like me that are adjuncts and graduate students that are deluding themselves that there's going to be a full-time tenure track job waiting at the end of the rainbow, and that seems more and more distant. But how has that affected your...
Well, last year was I had to kind of like half-ass years on the job market. And last year was my first really like hardcore job market year, 2018 to 2019. Mm-hmm. And I got a few interviews, and I got to like the final round of interviews for a few jobs, and one ended up being an inside hire, but the others, the funding just fell away at the last minute.
Mm-hmm.
So this year I was thinking like, okay, I got a couple of bites last year. My application's even stronger now. I've taught way more classes. I've published more, I'll go again. And then I asked my recommenders to revise their letters of rec. And my dissertation chair was like, oh, like, hell yeah, sure. And then my co-chair was like, absolutely. And then my former mentor was like, go fuck yourself. So, yeah, so
and that's the story. And that's the story you tell in this Chronicle article, which is kind of like that shocking moment where you go to, it makes me sick to even say this word interfolio, but you go to your interfolio account and you find that your mentor, one of your, primary recommenders, it sounds like, has withdrawn all her letters, which it must have been shocking to see. Like, what the fuck happened?
Well, yeah, okay, so to give a recap on that, I guess, before, or maybe I'll just finish with the job market shit.
Sure,
I did end up getting a replacement letter, but I was just so like bummed out. I didn't want to work on it. It was just really like dispiriting. So I did apply for a few jobs and I did get a few interviews, but nothing's panned out yet. And since there's a global pandemic, I'm really not expecting it to.
Yeah, I mean, I think about fall, and I'm like, it's a total blank to me, like a total question mark.
Yeah.
I had a hustle going that was like I had a couple classes at a couple different universities.
It wasn't great, but it was livable.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And now I'm like, if I don't have that, like I'm not even sure where I go from that. And that's something that I found in your article was really kind of comforting and helpful to know that other people in academia recognize that you have to make money still. And like, if you're barely like this contingent academic thing is already kind of barely paying a living. So once the virus comes, we're in adjuncts are going to have to figure out a way to survive this. I'm not sure what it will be.
I'm not sure that, our laissez-faire capitalism is going to survive this. So, hopefully it won't. But at any rate, so last summer I was going to be summer teaching, then that fell through. Then I got another part-time job. Well, it actually wasn't a long story, but that also fell through. And I think it was like July 1st. I was just left with my dick in my hand. Like, how the fuck am I going to pay rent? So, like sex work was literally my only option for making that amount of money in that amount of time. Mm-hmm. Like I don't have to turn in my rent on the first. I have like a little bit of wiggle room, but like there was a lot of time. So I told my former mentor and we talked like pretty regularly. We would email a lot. I actually, I had to compile not even all of our emails, but like relevant ones because there's now a Title IX investigation into her because of this. And just the document I had of compiled emails was 130 pages.
Wow.
And that's just like our friendly emails, not even emails about like my work. But at any rate, I wrote her and, we were like chatting. She was, I asked her about her summer. She wasn't doing so great. I wasn't doing so great. And then like the conversation got kind of tense and I felt like the way the conversation had led, I was kind of backed into a corner and I had to explain like a few things. So I said like, okay, look, this is how I've been making money for the past, month and a half. I've been kind of cagey about it. And I've always been kind of cagey about sex work with her because who wants to tell their mentor that they do sex work, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not like ashamed of it, but like I wouldn't, no.
It's really none of her business in a lot of ways. It seems like
it's absolutely none of her business. And I mean, like I had told my committee when I worked retail, mainly because I was like, if you want a discount, come on by. But yeah, I kept this to myself. But I told her, and it was like immediate. The tone of her emails shifted like dramatically, and I tried to get her on the phone, and she was like, no. She kept like, ignoring that, and she kind of stopped responding to my emails. So I got a feeling like, oh, she's trying to just like disengage. This is like I didn't know exactly what had happened or what had broken, but I knew like something had shifted. And this was beginning of August. So mid-August, I was like, hey, I'm going back on the market. Could you revise your letters? And I didn't hear back. And then like 10 days later, I wrote and I was like, okay, look, like I know our last couple of conversations have been kind of tense. I can't tell if you're trying to disengage or not, but if you are, I would prefer clarity so I can like plan for my future. Like that would like really make me sad, but I would like some honesty.
Don't ghost me. And then break up with me, but don't ghost me. Yeah, that's what you're saying, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And then on
no, go ahead.
September 1st, she wrote me and she was like, I'm not in a position to write this letter right now. There's a lot we'd have to talk about. And I have neither the energy nor the will to do it.
Wow.
And she'd been sick. Yeah. And like she and I were like thick as thieves. So it was really like, and I talked about this on another podcast on Sluts and Scholars, but I got that email directly before walking into a ball busting session.
Oh wow!
It's like you got to be.
That's going to be distracting during the ball busting session.
Oh well, not for him.
Well, for you, I mean, it's like getting bad news before you go teach. I've always found like when I get like a difficult text or email and then go teach, it's really distracting.
It was half distracting, but half like that fucking bitch hitting him like a baseball bat. But she didn't say anything. I mean, she said she wasn't going to write a new one,
right?
And she implied it was her health rather than my sex work. She still hasn't said that it was the sex work that made her withdraw. But she didn't say anything about withdrawing her letters of rec. So then about, like 3 weeks later, I was at work teaching. And I taught these 2 morning classes with like an hour and a half in between them. And I was sitting alone in the office, like, I want to see what she wrote. Like, I want to get the letter and see what it said. Cause like, I hadn't talked to her in like a month, and she and I would talk constantly. And I'm like, I want to hear a bunch of nice things about myself. I'm going to send this letter to one of my friends. So I went on to Interfolio, and I went to go select letters to send to my friend who's a professor at another school, so she could just like tell me what they said.
Beautiful. That's a nice little hack.
Yeah, like I probably should admit that, but like I don't care. So I log in, and like it already looks like there aren't enough letters, because I've like applied to so many schools. I'm used to seeing the like dozen or so that I'd like select just from over the years. I think she had 3 up there, and I log in, and her name is longer than my other Wikipedia's name, so I like it didn't look right, and I'm just staring at it like. And then I'm like, well, maybe there's another page. Is there like a second page of letters that I never noticed? And I'm like, no. I signed back out and I signed back in. I'm like, what? And then finally I was like, holy shit. She fucking withdrew them.
Wow.
Like, and she didn't even tell me. She just withdrew them. Like, holy fucking shit. I was incandescent.
Yeah.
I was so angry. And like I remember I was sitting by the window and like the air was coming in and I could like hear cars. I'm just like, like about to like chuck my computer across the room.
I can imagine.
Yeah, and then I had to go teach my other class. So I had an email drafted that was like, so I'm taking your name off of my CV. I wish I didn't have to do this, blah, 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 blah. I hope you're well. And I was going to wait to send that, but instead I was just like, well, like, fuck her, I'm sending this now. And I like went to go teach. And it's just been, a continued clusterfuck since then.
Well, I wanted to hear a little bit more of the background, because one of the things you write about in your article is this kind of like this thing that a lot of, I think, especially first generation academics experience, which is like negotiating this weird mentor relationship in the first place. Like, I mean, honestly, I'm a first generation academic. I didn't really understand that you had to like find a person that's going to be some sort of maternal, paternal figure to get you through. And that part was something that it's a weird negotiation. But how did you? Because I'm curious how this changed so quickly, because it seems like you had a good relationship with this person. But how did that relationship start? How did you first negotiate that?
Yeah. So I first took a class with her my second year of grad school. It was like a cohort class about like research methods and stuff, and she co-taught it with another professor. And she and I like hit it off. We just like got along pretty well. And like we had she's not in my primary field, but we had a lot of overlapping research interests. I don't want to say like what I'm trying to think of something like could like compare it to that doesn't give my field away. But like, you know, if I like, yeah, she wasn't in my primary like, era, I guess.
Oh, okay.
But,
yeah, that's close to me. I'm an American history Ph.D. and I do 20th century stuff, mostly 1960s and 70s, Vietnam War and stuff. And my mentor is Josh Brown, who is I have a much better relationship with, thank God. I never revealed anything like this to him, but and he didn't react anyway like that. But either way, yeah, he does 19th century stuff, so it was always it was a little mismatch. But it seemed like he had a lot of stuff to say about the Vietnam War era, and like it just seemed like it would match. I think that's something that happens a lot. Yeah.
So like if I were Vietnam War, then she would be like, I don't know, the Black Death. Let's say that's her field, but. Like overlapping interests in like labor and capitalism.
Okay. Yep.
So that's how we worked together. And we had some like shared theoretical interests. So I took 2 more classes with her, so 3 total. And because she wasn't in my primary field, I was able to talk to her about a lot of shit that wasn't like specifically my work.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, like, you know, interpersonal shit. We just kind of, it grew into a fairly close, a really close relationship, actually. I mean, like, let's see, my 6th year of grad school, she gave me the table that she wrote her dissertation on so I could write my dissertation on it.
Wow.
Right? It's like this beautiful antique wooden table. It was so heavy I had to get like a bunch of my roommates, or not my roommates, my neighbors to help carry it up the steps for me. But yeah, she gave me this like antique, it's literally 100 years old, it's from 1920, table to write my dissertation on. And like my roommates and I we literally called it Anne's Magic Table until this happened. Like,
you still have that table?
I do. I wrote my article on it.
That's amazing.
And my dissertation, for that matter. But yeah, no, we were really close. I left the city where I went to grad school for my last year and wrote my dissertation remotely from another city. And like she even flew me back for my defense because she knew I couldn't afford it myself.
Wow.
Right? Like we were real close.
And can you talk a little bit about that money part of it? Because that's something I always had a hard time bringing up to anybody at my school, which was the money situation. Like I remember writing letters to the department chair before I'd been accepted to the program, but I wasn't in yet, and I was just all I could think about was financial aid and how I was going to pay for everything, and I wanted to know if I was going to still be waiting tables, because that's basically was my hustle always, was waiting tables at shitty restaurants. Right. And I just wanted to know, like, am I going to move to New York and like have to wait tables while I do this? And it's like it's almost like you're not like getting through to them at all when you talk to them about that stuff. They
don't get it.
But it sounds like you had she had some sort of notion that you didn't have a lot of money.
Right. And we had talked, and she had indicated to me that she had also grown up kind of working class. She never like she always seemed to understand. And you know, since this happened, I'd never done this before out of like respect, but like I'm a really good researcher. So like I did a Google deep dive and I'm like, that bitch grew up upper middle class. Like, of course. Like, of course you didn't understand, but
it's amazing how many people think they have a working class background.
right? Yeah. And then I'm like, I'm not going to go into the details of my creepiness, but yeah, it's everyone thinks that they're middle class. It's like if you have a job, you think you're middle class. Like, no, that's not how that works. But where was I? Oh, money. So my first 3 years of grad school, I did sex work, and I obviously didn't tell anyone about it. And then finally I ended up quitting, and started working retail, which is, what I did in college. And my professors knew about that, but, they seemed kind of like perplexed. I think they seemed to think that the fact that I was working retail meant that I wasn't properly budgeting and wasn't spending my stipend in the right way. Because so, like, we all received the same stipend in my program. There wasn't really a difference between fellowships. And very few of the other grad students were working. So I think they thought that, like, oh, well, why is Snow not, like, why can't she handle her money as well as the other students? Like, well, because the other students are getting a fucking allowance. Like, that's why.
Yeah.
Come on, because this is, 2015 or whatever. It's not 1985. Rent is $12 billion instead of like 7 or whatever the fuck y'all paid. So yeah, I did get a lot of like side eye. My professor seemed kind of uncomfortable if I said like, oh, I have to bounce. I got to get to work. Like, conveniently, my co-chair grew up also like with similar circumstances to mine, so she didn't look down on it. But that was like it. And actually, it became an issue I think my 6th year of grad school, where I was on fellowship, but I got a TA-ship to supplement that. And the director of grad studies wasn't going to let me accept it because when you're on fellowship, you're supposed to be on fellowship and not also teaching. Like, the point is to finish your dissertation. And I was like, bro, I have to work like 20 hours a week at the fucking mall. Like, could you let me take this TA-ship so that I only have to work like 3 hours a week and make twice as much money? And he was like, no, you're supposed to be working on your dissertation. Oh my God.
Right. It's like there's one angle on it where it's like the people that are representing that point of view are kind of like shocked about your lack of commitment. That in other words, having a side hustle, having some job that's not in academia is like a betrayal of academia. You're supposed to be like fully committed to it, and that part of it is insane to me because it's kind of like, well, how the fuck am I supposed to pay for shit then?
Exactly. Like, it truly blows my mind. And one thing that I thought was strange was that they seemed to, like, because I didn't make a ton of money working retail, obviously, because it's fucking retail. I made like $12 an hour or something. They seem to think like, well, why is she even doing it if it's so little money? Like, it can't even be worth it if she's working that much for so little money. And I'm like, no, that's the point, because that's not so little money for me. That's like $200 a week. Like, that's a lot of money.
Yeah. Like, in terms of academia, I mean, one of the reasons I got into academia was like because I thought it would get me out of like kind of shitty jobs and I would be able to make money in academia. What a funny idea that is to me now. I mean, I say that, but like I've been an adjunct for like 14 years now, dude. Like I've been like doing this hustle for a long ass time, and just kind of like making it by teaching 5 classes every semester and that sort of thing, which to me, like, part of me is like, well, I don't wait tables anymore and I don't work those retail jobs and I'm glad to teach and I'm glad to like make a living off of it. But on the other hand, it's not exactly what I envisioned. But I'm wondering, because like so many other academics, they didn't seem like they were in it for the job. They were just like, oh, it was just kind of like, I want to study, the life of the mind type of thing. How did that work out for you? In other words, when you got into academia, like what was drawing you into it? Was it the study? How much of it was study? How much of it was conceiving of like working in it?
It was kind of a combination of the two.
Yeah.
I didn't understand that PhD programs paid you. I didn't know that. Like, why the fuck would I have known that? Like, all the adults I grew up around were like plumbers and shit. So I remember my 3rd year of college, I was talking to one of my TAs about how I really loved my field and I wanted to go to grad school, but I didn't know how I'd pay for it. And he was like, the fuck are you talking about? They pay you. And he grew up in circumstances similar to mine. he was like, no, like if you apply to PhD programs, then you get a stipend. And I was like, oh shit, wow. So it was, it was kind of like I'd planned on teaching high school until I saved enough money to go to grad school, so that I could have that like life of the mind bullshit.
Right.
Yeah. So then grad school itself seemed like a lucrative job to me. And of course the stipend was fucking nothing, but it was still more money than I'd ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
And I got healthcare, which I needed,
Mm-hmm.
which we all need. So yeah, I did see it as a path to social mobility. And I remember it was actually in this class that I took with Anne, hearing a bunch of my classmates or colleagues, whatever, talking about how academia is like taking a vow of poverty. And like, oh, well, we don't want to end up adjuncting and making only $30,000 a year. And I'm sitting there like, $30,000 a year sounds dope. That's like what my mom makes. That sounds awesome. Like, what are you people talking about? It's like, this isn't a vow of poverty. Like, I mean, little did I know, but less than they, I think.
Yeah, and that idea of like the martyring yourself over that is insane. Because
it's
like
ridiculous.
it's like you're saying, it's like to me, it's like that's a step up. It's like,
yeah, well, and I see that overlap in sex work too, where clients really want to think that you're doing it because you love it, and it's not really about the money. And like, no, I mean, like I don't hate it as much as I would hate flipping burgers, but yeah, it's about the money. It's about the fucking money. Ugh.
Yeah. That side hustle thing. I mean, at what point did the sex work side hustle start for you? Because it sounds like something you had done like intermittently in your life to like fill in the gaps of income.
Yeah, pretty much. I did some of it in high school actually, because I started college as a music major, and I couldn't afford lessons in my like instrument, so I started doing like, I mean, rudimentary, like I was 16 years old, like giving hand jobs for like $20 so I could go get a fucking music lesson, like the enormous nerd I am. So yeah, I did that in high school. I didn't do it again until I finished college, and I was trying to make ends meet, the gap between finishing college and starting grad school, because I went straight in, and I had like 3 months where I didn't know how I was going to eat. So I started like I would schedule like 2 dates a day just to get a meal, which is like way more work I find than like consciously doing sex work. It was sort of like a slide into sugaring, which is again like, I think some sex workers disagree over whether sugaring is sex work or not, but having done it and having done other forms of sex work, I find it to be the most difficult and taxing.
You're talking about sugaring, like the sugar daddy thing, that sort of thing, where you're kind of like, I mean, that sounds more like a social kind of labor, where you're like literally have to be someone's girlfriend. It sounds like to me.
It's really difficult. Yeah, I find it's really difficult, especially since FOSTA SESTA, because I did do some of it again last summer just to pay the bills. Yeah, no, it's awful. But it's not safe. It's not like you could go to like an in-call place or a dungeon to sugar. But at any rate,
not all sex work is the same, is what you're saying.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, yeah. At any rate, I moved to my city where I went to grad school, and I did some of it like intermittently again. I had a few clients, but I ended up it wasn't worth it after a while. It was just so much emotional investment for very little return that I quit for a while and then started up again last summer.
I'm wondering, I mean, how do you think about, I mean, it must have been like personally kind of hurtful to have your mentor turn on you in this way. I mean, it sounds like, I mean, to me, when I read your article, I was kind of like, well, she's obviously upset by the sex work element, and this isn't a professional kind of problem she has with it. It sounds more like she's like almost like a mom disappointed in her daughter or something like that. Did it seem that way to you? And I wanted to know if is there any indication now, looking in hindsight, that like that's what this is really?
Oh, absolutely. 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 And I mean, I remember my therapist saying, like, no, she is treating you like a mom. Like, you're not a part of this family if you're going to act like that. Like, yeah, that is how it really felt. And that, I mean, she was withholding affection as punishment. Like, absolutely what was happening. And, I was really, really, really hurt by it. Like, because, I mean, I don't really interact much with my own mother. She was the most maternal influence I had in my life.
Wow.
Ever.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was really hurt by it, and really upset about it until until the article kept going viral and she had an attorney send me a cease and desist letter accusing me of libel. And at that point I was like, yeah, okay, fuck this bitch.
Wow.
Yeah, we're done. Like,
she really turned on you.
Oh yeah. No, it was fucking like night and day.
I mean, was there any indication that there was some sort of like, I don't know, because whenever I think about the sort of like people being repulsed by sex work, I'm always like thinking about religious people or conservatism or some sort of like problem with the sexual element of it. I mean, is there any indication that that's what this is?
No, like she's a fucking Foucauldian. Like, I really thought she was gonna be cool with it. And like, I mean, the classes that I took with her indicated to me that she had progressive politics and progressive ideas. I'm not sure. It seemed kind of like she bought into that myth that sex work perpetuates sex trafficking in a way.
Yeah.
I think that might have been some of it. And a lot of people have said like, oh, well, it's generational. But I'm like, I have clients who are older than she is. Like, I know a lot of people older than she is who are totally fine with it and who understand that this is what the economy is. Yeah, it wasn't religious. I think, and she still won't admit that it was the sex work.
Then what was it?
I mean, it was a sex work, but like, honestly, I think she overreacted. I think she knows she overreacted. And she's just trying to frantically cover her ass. But, like even in the letter she sent, it was something like Dr. Blank, has worked hard to earn her reputation. And she was not required to provide you a letter after you admitted that you'd been working as a dominatrix. Being a dominatrix is not a protected category. But none of that says she was not comfortable recommending you because you were a sex worker. She just kind of obliquely alludes to it, which makes me think that there had to be something else, which I think goes back to the weird family dynamic there.
Yeah. They're like disappointed and grossed out, and now I can't look at you the same way. I mean,
right?
Yeah. I mean that seems like it's got to be part of it, or the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I tried explaining to her, I'm like, no, like dominatrices don't have to take off their clothes, and dominatrices like don't have sex with their clients, and that didn't help. Like I thought that was going to help, which kind of like upset me at the time because I was just playing back into the hierarchy of like which sex workers are more legitimate than others.
Right.
But I was really grasping at straws. And
did you hit her with any of the like intellectual element of this? Because one of the things we've talked about on the show, I've had a few different people who talk about sex work on the show over the years, and like for the people that we've had on, we've talked about sex work as a great lens into capitalism and labor and bodies and like discourse, like really important and illuminating shit. Did you hit her with any of that? Because it seems like if she's a Foucauldian, she might be kind of interested in that, right?
Well, I tried. She kind of obviated that conversation by writing to me. She's like, well, I understand all the arguments for sex workers and that, they should be paid a living wage or living wage, or they should be, it's a place to explore your sexuality, but I don't really buy any of those arguments. And even if I did, I don't think it's a good job for you specifically. Because she knows that I have, like most women, a history of sexual violence. So she was like, I think that this is just an attempt for you to regain agency over your body. Yeah, I remember the line. I will never forget this line. The one paragraph started, "Money is always nice to have, but it doesn't strike me that this is about the money." I'm like, yeah, no shit. It is nice to have.
I mean,
and I
to use the academic language, I mean, she's erasing your agency, man. She's sitting there being like, "No, you're telling me what this is about, but I'm telling you what it's really about."
Right. Yeah. Trying to and I tried to explain, like, and said, like, look, there's that myth within academia that if you have a side job, then you're not truly dedicated to your craft, which I experienced when I was working retail, and y'all were assholes about it. Like, even if I did apply for retail jobs last summer. I applied for a fuck ton of jobs. Dungeon was the only one that panned out. And I had another job that hadn't worked out, which she knew, but I know I explained to her, like, the professional repercussions of working at, like, a cafe versus working as a sex worker. She didn't give a fuck. Yeah, no, she was not listening to me at that point.
Do you think that's that her, like, attitude is representative of a certain kind of culture of academics who just, like, basically are grossed out by any kind of actual, like, labor for money?
You know, that has not been my experience. She did tell me that was going to be the case. I had a phone conversation with her back in October, which was a disaster, by the way. And she said something like, well, you better not tell or if you think that your chair or your co-chair would react any differently, then you've got another thing coming. They would do the exact same thing I did. And even at the time, I was like, that is such abuser rhetoric. Like, if you share that I'm treating you poorly to these other mentors, then they too will treat you poorly. Like I know what game you're playing, Anne, but that's not been my experience at all. Because I told her that the article was coming out before it did. The week that my editor and I thought it was going to come out, because I didn't want her to be taken by surprise. It's only dick would do that. Right. And then unbeknownst to me, she went and then outed me to the department chair, who also happened to be my dissertation advisor.
So this is beyond. I mean, this is like retribution. This is like beyond just like, oh, like, in other words, I can understand, and I don't like it, but I can understand if this person was like, okay, you know, I'm kind of uncomfortable with your sex work, so I'm just going to, like, withdraw my support and, like, take away the letters of recommendation. But this is like a step more. This is like she wants, I mean, ironically, it sounds like there's a desire to punish here.
Absolutely. And I remember when I found out thinking, like, she fucking told me that if my chair found out, then he'd withdraw his support too. Why? Like, and then she went and told him herself, like, expecting, like, either she said that to me as a scare tactic or she actually believed it. And either way, she really betrayed me by outing me to him. And I especially didn't want, like, my male supervisor to be thinking about me in sexualized terms, but you know, it wasn't up to me. So she
did out you, and it's too late for that. It actually,
she's outed me to a lot of people.
That is fucked up, especially because, like, you use a pseudonym, you know, of her and you in your article.
I went out of my way to protect her privacy.
Yeah,
I still haven't named her, but I was tweeting. I was really sick with the flu in February. I think I tweeted something like, "Man, if I go down, it turns out this is coronavirus. I've tweeted that bitch's name before I die," which I stick to.
Yeah, but you've got to. It's your duty.
Yes, but so in December, the article came out, and then I heard through the grapevine that my chair knew, and I didn't know at that point that she had outed me to him. So I wrote to my co-chair, who is also a working class woman, and was like, "Can I talk to you about something awkward on the phone?" And I told her, and she didn't give a shit. Neither of them gave a shit. Literally no one gave a shit except for Anne and, like, 3 old second wave feminists from the internet.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I was wondering about the like second wave feminist like turf thing because that's what this sounds like to me. Like the turf was it
Trans exclusionary radical feminist, and then
right.
SWERF is sex worker exclusionary radical feminist.
Yeah, well, I mean, these were for people that don't know, and I'm not an expert on the subject, but like during the '80s, there were the so-called like sex wars and porn wars in feminism that were all about this kind of stuff. And it seems, do you think that's part of what's going on here?
It's hard to say because the more I think about it, the less I think it had to do with the sex work. But then again, like, I don't know. She had never, I never experienced that kind of rhetoric from her before. She seemed to be up to date on her like gender theory.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
because this is very unwoke. This is very unwoke behavior from her.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe it's about the table.
Right.
Maybe she just wants her table back.
Yeah, maybe she wants her table back.
I want to know, like, what you've heard from others about this, because I'm wondering. I suspect, and maybe you know more about it than I do. I suspect that you're not the only like grad student, academic, adjunct, person that is that part of their side hustle is sex work. Have you heard from people, and did you know about that before?
Well, so Anne even said that to me in one of her emails. She was like, she said something like, "Oh, I can think of another grad student in our department who did sex work, but you're not a grad student anymore," is how she played that. But after the article came out, I got dozens of DMs from academic sex workers, and lots of sex workers with PhDs. There's actually another Mistress Snow with a PhD.
I know that because I saw it when I was Googling and finding your Skype or whatever. I put that term came in. Yeah, there was another like in Britain.
Yeah, I think hers is in chemistry.
Yeah, incredible. Another Mistress Snow PhD. Yeah,
ridiculous. But I've received dozens of DMs, academic sex workers, whether they're in college or in grad school or done with grad school.
Is your sense that they also are kind of, I don't know, hiding a little bit and not really being super open about that because they think that the culture of academia won't accept it?
Yeah. And, actually there was, at the dungeon where I used to work, there was a PhD student who was about to out herself to her mentor. And then I was like, whoa. Like, let me tell you about this. And that, I think it kind of scared a lot of academic sex workers off from doing that, which on one hand bums me out because I'd like people to be more open. But on the other, like, I don't want this to happen to anyone else.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds like it's made you more kind of like wanting to keep this quiet in some ways.
Well, and I hadn't really like announced it to anyone, my friends knew, like colleagues didn't. But yeah, no, I keep it very separate. Actually, the reason that I talked to my co-chair about it was because right when the article came out, and it was immediately successful. I was like, "Do you think I should put this on my CV? Do you think that will help me with any of these jobs?" And she didn't know. She didn't know what. Decided to err on the side of caution. So
this article being a popular, well-received article, you may not put it on your CV.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because way more people have read that than any of the other bullshit I've written.
Right.
Yeah. So I have to keep them, or I am keeping them separate. And, even if other faculty don't give a shit, I would feel really uncomfortable if students found out.
Yeah, I can imagine that part of it for sure.
Yeah. So that's my primary concern.
Well, the part of it that gets me is that, you did this personal relationship with this mentor, but it's also a professional relationship, and it's really tricky to understand the lines between that. But I mean, it sounds like you were like in a confessional moment here, saying, "Oh, well, there's something there's something I need to like tell you because I feel close to you, and that was weaponized against you.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. No, I was punished for making the mistake of trusting her, I guess. Which, I mean, even I hear myself saying that now, and it sounds like I'm like refusing to take any responsibility for this. Like, obviously, in hindsight, I wouldn't have told her. But I really did think at the time, I was like, because we were talking about we were talking about like my one summer job that had fallen through, and we were talking about like mental health. She was feeling depressed, I was feeling depressed, and I really thought that by telling her this, she'd be like, oh wow, like Snow's like not letting this get her down. She's like putting on her big girl pants and going and making money any way she needs to because she's an adult and that's what she has to do. Like, I thought she was going to think I was being responsible.
To me,
that's what I would.
yeah, of course. And this sounds like it happened in the summertime, right?
Yeah. I like remember exactly where I was when I told her because it was so fucking dramatic. It was August 6th. Yeah.
Yeah. 'Cause, I mean, summer was always a question mark, and still is. Like summer for me right now, I'm like, I had a couple summer courses lined up that I don't know if they're gonna go. I don't know if they're gonna go online. I mean, I have no idea. And summer's the worst time for academics. I mean, especially awful. Contingent academics.
I mean, winter's bad, but. And like really the only way I've been able to survive the winter as an academic is that I'm a Capricorn. So I usually get like some gifts that I can turn into money to pay my February rent. Yeah, it's like she seemed to think that there was another way that we have to pay bills that isn't contingent on our labor, on our contingent labor.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of magical thinking going on in academia, and talking to my mentors and even my advisors who were basically a lot of older men who had been tenured professors for like 30 years, which means they make six figures and have been for a long time.
And make six figures.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like it seems like once you make six figures and you do for a certain amount of time, you kind of forget about like life before, or you forget about kind of what it's like to worry about money, and it becomes just like. And
if you ever had to,
right?
Like I know she got a tenure track job right out the gate when she graduated. My other two, I mean, my committee had 5 people on it, but my chair and my co-chair, I don't think either of them got a job right when they graduated, so they were more sympathetic. They also weren't like super maternal with me, and they signed their emails with best instead of love. So it was a very different relationship. But yeah, no, it when you can pay your bills and still have money left over, I think you forget that. I mean, some people can't even pay their bills, let alone do that and then have enough money to spend on stupid shit.
Right. I mean, I get like, and there's such like obliviousness in among that class of academics. I mean, I would get emails from them in the summer when I'd be like, asking about stipends, asking about classes, and they're like, I got one that was like, well, I'm going to be in the Cape for the next 2 weeks, but then when I get back, and like, I'm like, wait, are you talking about the fucking Cape Cod? Are you like literally like with the Kennedys? Like, and I'm like, yeah, I'll be on the Cape. And like, when I saw that, I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, that's literally where you're at, is like on the Cape. And where I'm at is like, I'm going to go apply at Lowe's because I need a fucking job, which is something I've mentioned many times on this show, is that like Lowe's has been calling my name because I'm like, I can go over there and make $16 an hour or something.
Yeah, no, that's excellent.
Yeah. But then the more you do that and the more you think that way, the less I feel like an academic, the less I feel like, and that to me is like what your article gets so well, is that like the kind of class element of this that is just so ripe in academia, way more than a lot of other spaces.
The life of the mind means that we don't need to have any concern for the body. When you can't have a life of the mind if you don't have like health.
Yeah.
You can't.
Yeah.
Like, I remember, I think this was my second year of grad school. I was talking to Anne, and she had like just come back from Paris, I think. And I said something like, and I studied abroad for a semester in college, but I'd never been to Europe. And I said something like, oh God, I would love to go to Paris. I hope I get to go someday. because like I speak French, like that'd be amazing. I've always wanted to go. And she was like, oh, you've gotta. Why don't you go this summer? And I was like,
Yeah.
wait, excuse me? Like this summer? Like, you mean the one where I go 4 months without a paycheck? Why don't I just go to Paris? Well, I'm gonna let you answer that one. And like,
it makes you feel, I mean, it's so shitty because it makes you feel so naive. I've had tons of moments like that. And it makes me feel like, what did I do wrong? Like, what am I doing wrong that I can't just like go to Paris? Because that's really, to me, the worst.
When I did finally, because I did end up going to Paris, I was like shocked at how cheap that it was, like $300 per flight. Like, it wasn't that expensive over there, but that's besides the point. Yeah, it's just like that is in a level that, like, that's something that I am not allowed to imagine even. Like, I had never even considered the possibility of vacation anywhere, let alone Europe. Like, and for the summer, like, what now?
And I mean, part of me is like, well, I want that. I mean, and it still is, you know, where I'm like, okay, I'm still in the job market. I want that 6-figure. I want to be one of these people. And like, that's a weird feeling because I'm like, you know, what happens to me? I have all these attitudes about class and the structure of the way everything works. And I have nothing but contempt for that kind of attitude. And then at the same time, I'm like, well, I think you put it in your article as survivor guilt. The kind of like feeling in other words, the people that get a tenure track job, do you think that'll happen to you if you get a tenure track job? You'll be telling your grad students, well, why don't you go to Paris?
Oh my God. If I do, then I hope someone just fucking shoots me.
We'll be here to point it out. You know what? She was on the show once and she said she would never do that. Yeah.
Yeah. I wasn't going to out her, but
yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm always hyper aware of, like, with my students now, and obviously I'm not making 6 figures, but of the power dynamics. Like, even as I'm teaching, I'll be really open about like mental health because I'm like, okay, I'm in a position of relative power within this classroom. So if I talk openly about depression and anxiety and trauma, then, I mean, obviously not details, then that will help destigmatize mental health for, 150 or whatever students a semester. Like, that's something I could do. So I like to think that if I were granted some level of power or wealth, that I would stick to that. But,
that's why the structure is so dangerous, though, because that's what it does to people. I mean, it takes people that
it's impossible to see from. Yeah, you think like, oh, well, I worked this hard. And like, yeah, you do work hard to achieve that, but that doesn't mean that the people who don't achieve that didn't work as hard. Yeah, I mean, some of the most honest, like young tenured people who have gotten tenure track jobs now in today's awful job market, the people that you hear about like 700 applications for a single job, and you're like, well, the person that got that just fucking won the lottery. And if they're honest, they're gonna say that. Like, if they're honest, they're gonna say, yeah, I got this out of pure luck, because the fact that there are 700 PhDs applying for single jobs is just so mind-boggling that to me, I'm like, kind of like, well, I don't know. I don't delude myself into thinking I'm going to get one. And if I do, it'll be just like winning the lottery. Yeah. And the only reason I keep applying is because I do keep getting interviews, which sounds like kind of douchey to say. Like, well, I haven't gotten the job yet. I mean, I'm still kind of surprised that after this last season that I got an interview, because I was so like down about this entire situation. Yeah. But I even forwarded, so I got like an interview from like my dream school. I ended up not getting the job, of course. And I forwarded the email about it to her, thinking like this was how deluded I was. I forwarded it thinking like, oh, she'll be proud, and then she won't care that I'm a sex worker anymore because she'll see that I'm a serious academic because fancy school is interviewing me. She didn't respond. Isn't that sad that that's what this does to you? Or are you kind of like, oh, well, I can say now that I got an interview at this place, and that will somehow buy me some sort of social grace from these folks? Yeah. Well, my department share. So, like, do you love me now, mommy? Is it enough for you, mommy? That's what it sounds like to me. Will you braid my hair? Yeah. One of my friends was talking about I've kept the heat on. It's like, I mean, I'm bitch is not going to get away with this. But he said something like, well, if Snow gets that job she's up for, do you think that that'll be enough and she'll be able to just let Anne like go? And my friend who was talking to him was like, oh yeah, I think that'll be enough. Which I'm like, no, this isn't about academia even. This is about like being people. Like,
yeah, I mean, I still like, I mean, it's like an internalized kind of, I don't know. I'm always undermining myself. I'm always saying like, oh, I'm only an adjunct. I'm not a real professor. I'm just an adjunct. You know, like that sort of thing. Even though in on this show and in my heart of hearts, I'm like, no, I'm a fucking adjunct because the system is broken and that like there's no place for me and there's no place for thousands of us. But when I'm like just explaining to someone who's like not in academia, I have to like, there's this long story. It sounds like you're like have to tell the whole story of like the structure of academia for the last 30 years.
And they never really believe you, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. And like I have to explain what like, neoliberalism is and all that kind of stuff in order to explain my position. It sucks.
Yeah, no, I don't when I get like my hair blown out. Like I always end up having this conversation. About like they'll be like, oh, you're a professor? That's so cool. And I'm like, no, I can't. And I think it sounds to most other working class people the same way that hearing upper middle class people insist that they're poor sounds to us.
Yeah, no, totally.
Like, you don't get it. Like,
yeah, no, I get that. Yeah. It's like and then that's kind of the weird thing about class, right? Is like the academy itself is like associated with a certain kind of class mobility that's like distant from like, oh, I didn't go to college. I just went into the working world kind of thing. It does separate you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Which doesn't actually line up with reality that well at all, as we know, but
no, especially in, talk about neoliberal university, like as the adjunct thing becomes more and more like a hustle. I mean, it does feel like waiting tables. It's closer to that than ever before, where I'm like struggling to get shifts. I don't have enough money. I'm like phoning it in because I have too much to do. I'm physically exhausted because I'm on my feet all the time. I mean, just the list goes on. And I know that like, yeah, a lot of people could be like, well, you're a professor still and like that kind of thing. But it's, dude, nobody knows me. Nobody knows who I am. Yeah.
Or I was thinking, so when the dungeon where I had been working was like just awful. The owner was just an enormous dick. And I'd been meaning to transfer to the new one where I am now for months, really. And I didn't because I'd finally gotten a locker. So I could like leave a bunch of there. And my back felt so much better between like going between multiple campuses and a dungeon. Now that I had a locker, I was like, I'm never leaving. Like, sure, bring on the like labor violations and abuse. I don't care.
For the locker, like just the little bauble of the locker is enough to be like, I got to keep this job. I mean, for sure. I mean, I had my own cubicle at one of my schools. I stayed there for many years, and I was like, well, part of my rationale was always like, well, they gave me a cubicle that like I share with other people, and I see their gross crumbs all over the keyboard, but it's okay because I have a cubicle.
Exactly. Yeah. No.
Has this experience? I know we can wrap this up, but I mean, has this experience made you think about like academia in the whole, in terms of your own like kind of engagement with it? Did you think like, well, this has been so shitty that, and the future is so bleak that I need to find something else to do in my life? Or how committed are you to like kind of fighting it out in academia?
I like academia. I like teaching and I like research. So I guess it's that, that life of the mind shit that I'd still like to have.
Yeah.
I have ever since I've been dealing with this fucknut attorney that Anne hired, realized like, oh, I'd make a pretty good lawyer. So like I have thought about like law school maybe, but I mean, lawyers will say that the job market's just as bad, but like it's not. It's fucking not. It's not as bad. And like I'd go into more debt maybe, but I've been taking the Giles Corey approach to debt. Just more weight. Like it doesn't matter anymore. It's such a big number. It's just like the infinity symbol.
You're talking about like student loan debt?
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. I mean, Six
Nah, I'm never
figures.
paying that
Six
shit off.
figures.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, honestly, you do the math on it, you look at it and like, I could pay $500 a month for the rest of my life and never, ever touch the principal. Literally,
Same.
yeah.
Yeah.
So what's the point of even thinking about the principal? You know what I mean? Like, what's the point of, like, I see that amount and I'm like, well, that's an amount that's kind of irrelevant to me.
There's this Kathleen Madigan joke where she talks about the national deficit and the number's so high. She's like, you might as well say that the national deficit is mashed potatoes.
Yeah.
Like, that is how I understand this. It's just this like amorphous glob of something that's never going away.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're in a moment now where things are, I think, going to be restructured one way or the other. I mean, I don't know what the fuck that means. I don't have a lot of hope they're going to be restructured in a way that's beneficial to us, but...
Yeah, this downfall of capitalism that seems to be happening around us is both way more rapid and way more boring than I ever could have imagined.
Yeah. I mean, I thought that it would come in an unexpected way, and maybe this is that, but...
Here's hoping.
Yeah, I know. It's weird because I was just in a department meeting, Zoom fucking department meeting last week, and they were like, all the tenure track people were like, I just can't wait until fall comes and everything's back to normal. And I'm kind of like, well, normal kind of fucking sucks for me, to be honest.
Also, like, this isn't going back to normal.
No.
It's not going to fucking happen.
No. And
no.
they're going to be trying out a lot more online shit, and like, who the fuck knows what it'll look like in fall. But
well, and I mean, I bet that now that more states are doing shelter in place orders, I don't think we're going to be really leaving the house much until about mid 2021.
Yeah.
Based on like projections.
Yeah, and what that will do economically to us is up for grabs.
Oh yeah, maybe I don't know. Maybe we'll be sitting like this time next year in our palaces, listening to this, being like, "Ha ha! Our adjunct poverty, it is gone."
We can hope.
We'll be in like camps.
I'm just gonna say we're gonna have to do Burning Man on like a Zoom meeting this summer. We're not even gonna be.
I thought Bonnaroo got canceled. That was always my favorite.
Oh my god. Well, Mistress Snow, Ph.D., thanks so much for sharing your story. I advise all my listeners to go check out your article in the Chronicle and follow you on Twitter, because you've got a link that goes beyond the paywall of Chronicle. I certainly needed that.
Yeah, so there's a pinned tweet that's like the original art like link to it, and then that one expired, so I had my editor generate a new link. So yeah, it's just the second one down from.
Yeah, it's such a great piece, and I want to reiterate that even if you're not a sex worker, there's a lot to identify with in terms of being an adjunct, having to work while you are getting a PhD or done with your PhD, and working outside of the academy, and how that intersects with the culture of the university. It's really, really cool stuff. So thanks for writing it, and good luck with everything.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me on.
Of course. All right, I want to give a huge thank you to my guest, Mistress Snow, Ph.D. Go follow her on Twitter. Go check out that Chronicle article. There's even a link on her Twitter page to a non-paywalled version, a way to get around that paywall and read that article, because it really gets at some of these issues in a really, I think, a deeper way than we were even able to get to in this conversation. So thank you for joining us. If you want to see more Nostalgia Trap stuff and get in on our conversations with Justin Rogers Cooper, what's happening with the pandemic and where we think it might all be going, you can do that on our Patreon page at patreon.com/nostalgiatrap. Thanks so much for all the people who are supporting the show, and we'll talk to you again very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.